Welcome to Why the Long Face? Two old friends lifting the lid on mental health over a beer with author and psychiatrist Paul Keedwell and business consultant and so-called comedian Ollie Turnbull.
And we're recording, Oliver. I think we need to welcome people to our latest podcast.
That's a fantastic idea. Episode, where are we now? 7th episode of season 2.
Aren't we?
Yep.
Yeah.
And
time flies.
Yeah, when you're having to do something, it's having fun. No, I'm enjoying
Welcome
this
back,
season
everyone.
very much. Very much.
Yeah, it's a nice varied season, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got all sorts
And
of things.
thanks everyone for your suggestions. Keep them coming.
Yeah, we'll do pretty much anything.
Yeah.
We haven't even thought of a theme for season 3.
No. We'll just carry on in a rambling way, I think.
Do it. Yeah. That's been pretty popular so far. Well, it's been
It's
consistent
increasingly popular,
yeah, we
right?
are getting a little bit of
We're getting some traction now.
We're getting traction. We're getting a rise in
Thanks to
listeners,
you.
and we appreciate that.
Yeah.
You can help us even more by subscribing, commenting, and liking.
Yes.
But we'll remind you about that later. So,
Yeah.
what's the subject this week?
So we are doing.
Doctor?
So we are talking about. So this is a subject close to my heart, actually, because I wrote a book on this. This subject was contained within it, which was about how we optimize our built environment to facilitate mental well-being.
And
right.
just because you're far too shy to mention it, the book is called Headspace: The Psychology of City Living by Dr. Paul Keedwell, available from all average to low-end bookshops.
So unfair.
And online. No, you can buy it from Amazon, where it's selling like the proverbial
Tepid
cakes.
Yeah. Anyway, so
It's good though. It's very good.
It's all right. Yeah, it's okay. Well, Monocle liked it. They said
Who?
it was a brilliant book.
Who said this?
Monocle.
No way.
Yeah, you don't know who they are, do you?
No.
They're a very trend-setting
Are they?
magazine. Yes.
Monocle. What do they say? What was the actual quote?
Uh,
As if you can't remember
this
it
brilliant
word for
book by Paul Keedwell, or something like that.
Wow.
Anyway, let's move on
No,
and talk
that's very
about.
good. That.
Let's talk about the subject, which is biophilia and how exposure to nature improves our mental well-being.
Biophilia. So literally, bio
Well, biology, that's the biological bit. That's nature.
and philia.
Attraction to, or love of, I suppose,
So biophilia.
is attraction to nature. But it's the biophilia hypothesis is that we have an innate attraction to nature.
That's the BET.
And I guess it all comes from, it's all part of this evolutionary psychology type trend, which is, I quite like, I'm quite interested in. So the theory goes because in our ancestral environment, for example, a flower gave way to a fruit, we were inherently attracted to the beauty of that flower, not for its own sake, but also because it had the promise of sustenance. That's the sort of basis of the theory.
Got it. Is that sort of explain why? It was a question I had for later, but I'll ask it now. Is that a flower looks beautiful to us, but you can't really put your finger on why. It just, a rose, even a carnation, a lily, one of my favourites. They just look beautiful and elegant and nice. And it could sort of explain that.
It could, yeah. Well, probably wherever flowers grow, there's likely to be water as well.
Right.
Which is important, vital
Yes.
for our survival.
Yes, absolutely. Things you
but
learn first.
water
We have to have
itself, water itself is innately attractive.
Waterfalls, beautiful. Rippling pool.
Well, you've only got to look at the stats on how many trips us humans make to the seaside or to lakes or to rivers for recreation.
Pools of sweat, dribbling down the biceps of a well-toned boxer as he works out and pummels that heavy bag.
It's quite homoerotic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
Can I take a minute?
Yeah.
So who's this geezer, Edward O. Wilson? Have you heard of him?
Yeah, he's just some geezer who came up with the biophilia hypothesis.
In 1984, and he defines biophilia as, I like this, the urge to affiliate with other forms of life. Nice. Like it.
Yeah.
But
So attraction to other living things, an innate attraction to other living things.
And so that's presumably animal and vegetable, but not necessarily mineral.
Correct. And the thing is, it's not necessary to all types of nature, of course. We're a little bit averse to any natural predators or dangers in the landscape, right?
Right.
Which is understandable, because his theory, I think, would pay homage to Darwin and natural selection and why we're attracted to certain things innately.
Homage,
because they
not
were
homage.
homage. I know a lot of people say homage.
Do they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. You said homage, like a
Oh.
big Jesse.
Okay, moving on.
All right, fine. Being like that. You just give me a lovely rice supper as well, and I'm being nasty.
No, it's
That's
fine.
the kind of person I am.
Tomato. Yeah,
Okay.
You're supposed to be leading this.
Yes, I know.
I don't think you're totally convinced, though, are you?
But
I think
getting there.
so you
but
kind
the
of
other thing is, you look at a beautiful sunset or a beautiful ocean. That ain't living, but you do feel an affiliation and affinity and a sense of awe and beauty towards that thing. Is that different?
Yes, I think so. I think that that Mr. Wilson is not necessarily central to our argument. That is that having exposure to natural environments is necessary to maintain or promote mental health.
Right. And there seems to be two things. One is just appreciating it aesthetically, and the other is wanting to be part of it, wanting to roll around in a green meadow, or for example, or wanting to pet a baby lamb. What are they called? Lambs. I really have read it well on this one. Is that two different things? One is saying that the sight of a cheetah running in the tundra, is that where they run? No idea. Is a magnificent sight, as opposed to I want to run through a wheat field.
I think they run on the plain or the savannah. Probably.
Yeah, savannah
and
sounds
the
right.
Tundra.
Isn't tundra snow?
Yeah, that's frozen soil, isn't it? Tundra.
There's no way you get a cheetah on frozen soil.
I don't think you're going to get it anywhere close.
No. Savannah sounds a bit better.
Help.
But isn't that just grass?
Snow leopard, maybe.
Possibly. Snow leopard on the savannah.
Anyway, let's get to the point, which is that
appreciating nature or being of nature is my question.
Right. We are part of the biosphere, I guess, aren't we? So we're going to appreciate it as much as anyone else. But we're going to feel more at home and more aligned with nature than we are necessarily a concrete urban environment, which is something that's come about very recently. And we're not, I suppose the argument goes, we're not adapted to thrive in that sort of rather austere environment.
Or sterile, it's sort of functional, I guess you'd say.
You're right.
So a block of flats, in terms of an efficient way of housing a load of people safely with amenities they need, ticks every box.
Yeah.
But in terms of satisfying is it bio?
Well, high-rise living satisfied people's basic needs in the sort of times when a lot of our housing was in disrepair and didn't have proper sanitation, proper heating, proper cooking facilities, and so on and so forth. It was a quick, probably cost-effective, definitely cost-effective solution to our basic physical needs, but it ignored our, arguably, our mental health
biophilic needs. Because at the time, it must have felt like a miracle. We can house people who've been in, I don't know, back-to-back terrace houses, in these houses in the sky. They'll be clean, they'll be safe, they'll have water, electricity and heating. It's a miracle. And but like you say, it ignores the fact that actually it takes away a sense of community, and it takes away being even the slightest bit closer to nature.
Yeah. Unless you're lucky and you've got the view from your apartment block is rolling hills, which is likely not to be. It's likely to be view of another block in front of you, or a cityscape.
So from a utility perspective, very good. From a mental health perspective, maybe not, because I think you're implying that unless we have some things going on in our lives which satisfy our biophilic urges, that can lead to, I don't know, what is it? Is it stress?
So
depression?
it all comes back. Well, let's just say that it has an unconscious, slow, grindy influence on our mental health, which could lead to anxiety, depression, and so on. Yeah. I mean, you've got. So there's a whole wealth of evidence that has arisen, and I guess this is it's a huge amount to cover in one episode, but environmental psychology, or even you could say architectural psychology. So how what experiments, what evidence has been amassed to support the idea that we need to have contact with nature to feel better.
Right.
And it all goes back really to, I suppose, the pioneers of environmental psychology were Roger Ulrich and Rachel Kaplan in the 1980s, who were based in the UK actually, and environmental psychology has sort of died off in the late 90s, but continued to take off in the States. And it's only now that it's sort of come on trend again. I think it was very untrendy
And a bit mocked.
during the noughties. And a bit mocked.
mocked, really.
It
Possibly
was summed up
unfairly.
as you just need to go to the allotment, do a bit of gardening, and you'll feel better.
Yeah.
But yeah, the essential evidence that they amassed was, to give two examples to kick us off. Roger Ulrich did a systematic study of the rates of recovery of people post-surgery in hospitals, depending on where their bed was situated, whether it was situated next to a window looking out onto trees and nature, or whether it was facing onto a wall.
Physical recovery or mental recovery?
Physical.
Right. Wow.
So physical recovery, so they needed less pain relief, and they had fewer complications in the surgery, and they tended to have a shorter length of stay. So that was a sort of fairly groundbreaking study. And the implication being that your mental health, or the calming effect of nature speeded your recovery.
And that's just being
So
able to look at it.
Psychosomatic effect, basically,
Right.
of nature. And this, again, was around the time that Rachel Kaplan was saying that we suffer in the modern urban world sensory overload. We've got everything bombarding us, basically. And when we go into nature, it's restorative. And she did a number of studies to show that it had an immediate calming effect on us to be in a green environment. And also, if we were, and not only that, but if we were then made to do some gardening, which may not be everyone's instinctive cup of tea, right?
Definitely
So
not.
if you're a white-collar IT executive, no one's going to get you down.
Why do you use that as an example?
Put a spade and a fork in your hand and say... but actually, if you did...
Because it's awful.
You'd find that your blood pressure would go down, your stress hormones would go down.
I'd be pissed off.
And initially, maybe.
Weeding. Can there be anything worse in the
And
world?
she said that mostly it's
Weeding.
about the calming effects of nature, which are innate, which ties in with the biophilia thing. But she was also saying that there's something very therapeutic about you sowing the seed, nurturing the seed, seeing the plant grow. No, but actually the creative element of it. You're
No, I can see
creating
that. I can
you're
see that. I'm
creating
being cynical,
something,
yeah.
and that feeds back in a very positive way. So that, I guess that's the basis of a lot of the research that's come from then, really.
So-
It's all built around that general idea. So in the way that we think about designing our public play spaces for kids, the way we think about greening up our cities, that's that little space perhaps between the pavement and the road could be planted with shrubs, or you could have that central reservation. You could plant some stuff in there.
Stick a squirrel in there.
Stick a squirrel in there.
But one thing, though, before you go on, and I'm assuming
Go on about
on and on.
and on. Water features. I don't even get me started on water features. There's so much to say on that.
But they're not
Or
living.
waterside living.
They're not living, though, water features. That's the
No,
thing.
no, get off that.
Okay.
We're talking about nature.
Oh, right. Well, we did say bio
In general.
living. Okay, that's good. So bio doesn't actually just mean living. It means
No,
nature.
but actually the presence of water infers life.
Okay. No,
So
I'll
that's
let you have
why
that
it
one.
has that instinctive. That's the theory. It has that, and we don't know, but the studies show that people instinctively prefer landscapes with water in them. They do. They always choose that landscape over one that doesn't.
Just go back to what Kaplan was saying.
Unless there's too much water. Sorry. Quick caveat. If there's only seriously,
Really?
if there's only a tiny bit of land and mostly water,
Yeah.
people don't like it
Really?
as much actually as they still prefer it to a completely concrete space, urban space, but they don't like it as much as as a green space without any water. There's a hierarchy.
Oh, I love it.
There's a hierarchy.
You know me in a hierarchy.
Right, so
gotta love the hierarchy.
right at the top.
Okay, let's hear it.
Right at the top, you've got a green landscape with some water in it, right? And then then you've got a green landscape without water, and
Right.
then you've got the urban concrete jungle.
And where does too much water fit into this?
So the more green you add to the concrete jungle, the more pleasant it is. And then if you add a bit of water to the green, so it's even more desirable. But then, if it's too much water, you're going right back down again.
Like the uncanny valley, but it's
I think
watery.
it's about threat of drowning or something like that. It's just, we're overwhelmed by a massive
Yeah.
amount of water.
What happens if you stick a sheep in it or a nice
I suppose it
cute
reminds
horse?
you of being flooded
Yeah, maybe.
or
What a-
marooned.
Or a kitten. Whatever you stick a horse in it. Better? Worse?
Better.
Couple of horses?
Better than one.
2 horses and a goat?
Even better, I reckon, unless you're feeling crowded out
Oh,
by
yeah.
this stage.
And then some freaky animal.
Depends if you've got one in the foreground, one in the background.
Well, what about you sticking some freak animal like a platypus?
If you've got a horse's nose right in your face, I reckon that's going to...
And where does the
You know
platypus...
what, it's like
where does the
nature's
platypus-
fine as... Nature's
Ignoring
fine as
the
the platypus. We love the platypus.
You love the platypus?
There's no threat there
that
from the
would freak me
platypus.
out. A platypus.
What a platypus?
green,
Why?
Too much water and a platypus.
No,
Does it look weird?
platypus look weird. Yeah, but it's more comic than threatening, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. The way they walk, those little fellas, those little buggers, they try to walk along with their massive face.
Right, so this chap, Roger Ulrich, okay, he didn't just stop at hospital beds. He did a whole load of research onto what sort of landscapes we find attractive, right? We've talked about the hierarchy of the water and all that. Interestingly, with that, you only need a tiny bit of water. Like it's a water fountain or something to be like, yeah, to be much more calmed by a scene. It's
Do
amazing.
you know what? Look, it does make
They
a
should
lot of
put
sense,
little
right?
water fountains in every concrete housing estate.
Like a water fountain in your...
You know, just stick my face in one right now, wouldn't you?
Right. But it doesn't make actual sense, right? The trickling of water is quite nice. And of course, it might play back to our natural sense of
Need to pee.
needing to urinate.
Trickling water. It doesn't have to trickle.
Don't tell me there's another hierarchy.
Actually, we would prefer running water, though, actually.
Right, because it's
Or
fresh.
sea. Moving water is complex
'Cause
and
it's fresh.
interesting.
Oh, no, it's fresh, though. Think about it.
And it's fresh.
Our primitive brains
Ooh.
think that's fresh water.
Yes.
Rather than water that a hippo has
I
shat
love
in.
the fact you're getting into this now.
I do love it, but I do have one crucial question. Crucial question is that Rachel Kaplan and the other gentleman, they seem... Rog seem to be looking at the effect of seeing nature rather than being part of nature. And I'm
Or
wondering...
immersed in it, you mean?
Exactly, immersed in it, milking a cow.
Right. No, but the thing is that people have done research into that. I'm saying that they were the early pioneers.
Okay.
We take city dwellers for a walk in an urban forest, for example, has a huge impact on their sense of. Well, there's lots of things that nature does to you. It doesn't just calm you down. It actually inspires you to come up with answers to things. It helps you put things in perspective. It's a place of contemplation, and that goes right back to the old Native American idea of the vision quest, which usually occurs at difficult transitions in your life. It could be the loss of someone. It could be a rite of passage type thing, where you're about to become an adult for the first time, or you're about to marry for the first
Or a
time,
baby comes along.
or a baby comes along, and you sort of go out into the wilderness for 3 days, and you commune with nature, and you come back supposedly with greater insights that you then impart to the rest of the community. But there's something to this. There's always that danger that's tipping into a kind of hippie nonsense, right?
Well, it
it's
is.
easy to ridicule, but there is a link between being in that kind of natural environment, immersed in it, and an increase in creative potential.
Do you think it's because if you're wandering through a cityscape, like when I walk through Manhattan, for example, or even parts of the city of London, I'm kind of overwhelmed by the unnatural proportions of the buildings.
I think that's what they're saying.
And I think that can freak you out. Whereas, of course, in your wood, you're in a place of natural proportions. Trees are big.
Yeah.
Lichens stick onto them. Animals are scurrying around at the right scale, a natural scale, if you will.
Yeah.
Like that. But the whole thing about cityscape, which is what A, makes it interesting, 2, utilitarian, but 3, a bit freaky outy because those buildings are too big. I remember walking through one of those gorges in the great big down Fifth Avenue or whatever in New York. And I'm looking at these buildings, and I feel a sense of obviously inferiority, very unlike me, and also the fact that the scale's all wrong. And I'm just a little ant with these massive boxes.
And Rachel Kaplan would say, it's not just that things are not of a human scale, which is intimidating. There's a lot of stuff that's designed specifically to grab your attention. And Rachel Kaplan would have said, it's all about attentional overload. You're losing the ability to reflect because of all this. And it's only when you get into a natural environment that you're able to actually consolidate everything that you're being bombarded with.
Yeah, but if it's overstimulation that's the issue here, why don't you just go into a flotation tank where there's zero stimulation? Why is it that nature...
Well, flotation tanks work. They work very well.
So you could... The answer is you should.
Yeah.
So going back into nature, it's not so much about the fact that it's nature, it's about that there's less artificial stimulus. Okay, I'll dig that.
Though that for most people, going into a flotation tank is not a practical solution on a regular basis for overcoming your stress. So other things might make more sense, like deciding to live near a park, like deciding to live near the sea.
But people do that. I'm going to go for a walk to clear my head.
Or they go for a walk.
I'm going to go for a walk on the beach to clear my head. And
now
they actually say this, don't
they?
they?
Now there's a statistic that I think particularly you will find fascinating, which was that there were hugely increased visits to Central Park after the 9/11 disaster.
I do find that fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow, that is absolutely fascinating.
And it's also
we naturally go back to nature when we have the opportunity to. Because
when we've had enormously stressful. So there's that whole other lump of literature which is about how nature buffers against stress, a stressful life event or an accumulation of stress. And people go, and they instinctively seem to do that. Yeah.
That's great. That's a great
There's
factoid.
another big chunk of research on people who've recently been diagnosed with cancer tend to go to natural spaces.
Wow. So it's a little bit like the Red Indian thing.
Yeah.
Where a traumatic or life-changing event happens, they go off, when really they should have probably put more work into inventing the gun. But they decided to too soon. But they decided to
bow and arrow is pretty effective, but not as effective as the gun. Let's face it.
So it turns out, It's interesting though, how that might relate to. So it might relate to therapy for people who are suffering from anxiety type illnesses, presumably. Is there something that can avoid drugs, which makes use of this biophilia tendency that we all seem to have?
Yes, it's in our DNA somehow, in our blueprint, that we are comforted by the natural world and other living things.
Do you think this is why the Victorians would send people who had bad humours or whatever it was off to sanatoria in the countryside? Do you think they knew that innately? That
I don't know. I think they had a little bit of an obsession with fresh air.
Right.
That was more than anything else. But yeah, exposure to sun.
Which is probably a good thing, actually, if it doesn't burn you.
Or if you want a decent amount of vitamin D.
Oh, yes.
Most of us London dwellers are vitamin D deficient through the winter months. We don't check, so we don't know. But apparently most of us are.
It's given me a big swollen belly, my vitamin D deficiency.
Yeah, it's a useful excuse as well for people who eat too much and drink too much.
Yes, well,
and don't do any exercise.
And are 50.
Don't. Your age is not an excuse, man.
Okay. Can I give you a quote from a movie though, which is a more of a cynical angle to this? Because I think you're going to recognise the movie eventually. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So character one, you know what we should do?
What should we do?
You've got it already.
Yeah.
What's the film?
With Nell and I.
Absolutely. So I says, you know what we should do? I say, I know what we should do. And he goes, how should I possibly know what we should do?
What should we do?
What should we do? Exactly. Get out for it for a while. Get into the countryside. Rejuvenate. And then the classic line comes. Shall I do it?
I'm in a park and I'm practically dead.
Exactly that. Rejuvenate. I'm in a park and I'm practically dead. What good's the countryside? And then they go into a discourse about how long it is till the pub opens.
And then it's a whole kind of road movie type thing where they come across howling gales and rain and dodgy farmers and bulls and
But you'll notice that when Withnail finds a potato, he's triumphant. He's in a muddy field, pissing rain.
That's true, actually.
He says, I've got one.
He got a potato and also a stick, which he calls the
fuel inward situation.
fuel and wood situation. Yeah,
You've got to be a fan of the film.
yeah.
I noticed
Most people who watch it, I think, become fans, don't they?
Yeah, but who's watched it? You seem to be thumbing through your book.
No, I just was thinking a little bit about. I just kept looking for a particular name, which was Richard Louv, which isn't an easy name to remember. Louv.
Really?
And he's a journalist who wrote a book called Last Child in the Woods.
Oh, right, nice.
And he coined the term nature deficit disorder.
Oh, here we go.
In response to how we are raising our kids these days, plonking in front of a TV or not restricting access to smartphones and iPads and the like, which is leading them to be deficient in their exposure to nature, which he argues has led to lots of problems like attention deficit disorder, anxiety and depression. He thinks that they are linked.
You could see it. You can certainly see it as a hypothesis. What's he got to back it up?
To be fair to him, a whole book of evidence from various studies, all of which are probably quite small studies and reflect the difficulty there is in trying to do research in this area, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But I think it's a hypothesis worth looking at, especially when you think, well, it is actually consistent with other evidence that we've got that shows that kids prefer to play in natural environments to constructed playgrounds.
They love a ball pit, though.
And the more that well, they do, but the more that constructed playground has natural elements in it, like a water, like a pond.
The water, and, always with the water.
Yeah, and a sand pit. It's about the things that the kids love most, and not the miniature houses and the horse they can rock on and stuff. It's how can they get their hands dirty? Put some water in with that sand pit and make a sandcastle.
And it's boys and girls as well.
Yeah.
From
how do I
observations.
get my hands dirty and actually interact with that environment?
Yeah.
Not things that are passive that you do.
Yeah.
But
and strangely, when they're very young, so when my kids were growing up, they'd love the sandpit, the boy and the girl, and all their boy and girl friends. When they're very young, it's only later that they start to diverge, and one wonders whether we're doing that to them or it's innate.
Or we're doing that to them, exactly. Because actually, as adults, we prefer to play in nature. We like nooks and crannies, places to hide, places to explore, and that has been shown that in our preference for the built environment as well. We prefer facades on buildings that have some complexity. And we prefer interiors that have some complexity, that actually have some mystery and places to explore and some cubby holes and things like that.
Like a child.
And in fact, if you watch children play in the average playground with swings and slides and things like that, they are often seen pairing off underneath things, underneath slides or behind things. So,
that's nice.
Yeah, so I think all of that is useful for understanding how we might better design our cities going forward, but also the areas of the city that we might want to seek out more often than others.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
You know science?
Yeah, man.
You're a scientist.
Yeah.
And I studied science at university a lot less successfully than you did, or indeed than most of the people in my year.
I was going to say, as majority of the population.
Majority of the population, including morons, cretins and idiots. I did, you do have this sort of rather taken for granted love of the scientific method and scientific progress. And maybe we have got lost in the desire to do things which are possible at the expense of doing things which are good for our mental health. For example, the idea of creating an entire city that's underground or whatever it's almost like us combating nature, proving the human superiority.
Right.
The irony being that it makes the humans that are within that environment miserable.
Right. So harnessing the aspects of nature that actually make us feel more relaxed and more creative and more inspired.
Yeah. And so actually trying to use technology to combat it by giving us all central heated, boxy houses. So we've beaten nature in one sense, and then we're losing the advantages that nature gives us
mentally.
in another.
Yeah, because
mentally,
we're
exactly.
divorcing ourselves from going out and getting the firewood to feed the fire. And when we do that, a more basic kind of camping kind of existence, that is so rejuvenating. Have you not noticed that?
100%.
I mean, is it a hell of a hassle getting there, or the kit you have to put up, and in you battle with your kids, but once they're there, oh my God.
So as you know, we go camping a lot. It's like up to about 10, 15 families, each with multiple kids. And there's not an iPhone or iPad in sight. They're making swings, they're climbing trees, they're scuffing their knees, and they're playing football, and they are playing with fire, sometimes supervised, sometimes less supervised, and they're absolutely, you can see it in them.
I think one dies in the fire every year, right?
We normally have a couple of fatalities, and I mean,
that's
lucky.
not bad, it's a price worth paying.
The last time we were very lucky, a single mutilation.
And one all dead out of the pond.
Oh, and there was some life-changing injuries as well. No. Okay. But the adults were fine, so it was. But
the other place that kids love and adults too is the beach, and part of the reason for that is that, the whole family tends to get stuck in. When you're camping, you often see the parents sitting down on their asses by the tent, the kids are running around. On the beach, they tend to get involved more, so kids love it. Yeah. That's the thing that kids love the most. Yeah. It's not just because it's, I don't know, there's something about probably the sea as well, and the fact that they're able to interact, as I said before, with nature. Yeah. They're able to dig, they've got something they can dig with, build with, splash around in.
It's like you're in a toy. I remember when I went to the beach the first time, so we were not near a beach, so it was an unusual thing. And it's just kind of a weird place where it's a toy. The sand is like a toy, and the sea is this massive blue movie thing, and it's just kind of wondrous in a way. Not to say disconcerting to begin with, but in a nice way.
Yeah. So I think the lesson from that is if we should try to make sure that we, like in this great city, preserve little pockets of nature for people to go to play in. Play is a uniquely mammalian activity. It's something you do for pleasure. There is no other purpose to it. The effects, though, of play are an improvement in your motor skills, your social skills, because you're playing with other kids and you're learning about cooperation. And I guess also an appreciation of nature, which makes you want to preserve it.
One of my abiding memories of growing up was my dad got some insider information about a set of badgers on Ilkley Moor. And he says, you can't tell anyone where these badgers are because I've been tipped off. And we woke up at 4 a.m. one morning in the summer, and we took a hip flask of whiskey. I would probably only be about 8, and I pretended to like my sip of whiskey when actually, of course, it was rank. And we went up to this secret place on Ilkley Moor and hid in the bracken and laid down there for about 2 hours. And then these badgers came out with about 4 cubs, and they started playing at dawn with each other.
Right.
And I never really understood the idea that animals played. I thought it was a bit weird, but it was a wonderful memory of these badgers just as the sun coming up, actually playing and biting each other's ears and rolling around.
And we humans will naturally start playing, it's been shown, in natural contexts more than in man-made ones.
Really?
No, we play, kids tend to play more in natural settings. That is absolutely true. And of the man-made playgrounds, it's the ones that are more complex and have more areas of mystery and places to explore that are preferred. Yeah. And they tend to be more densely popular. And as I said, with things that mimic nature, like water, like sand.
And do you remember in the 1970s, there used to be this thing called an adventure playground, because playgrounds have been rather sanitized in the 60s, and they were plastic and sort of painted wood. Yeah. And then there was this much bigger, more complex, more natural wooded adventure playground. The only difference was that they were bigger, more natural, and therefore you could get really nasty splinters. But it made for a better.
Well, I remember much preferring those to the artificial ones. Yeah,
me too.
They're even more fun than, say, going to an amusement park and roller coasters and all those artificial means of adventure. I think that you actually have a much better experience in these adventure playgrounds.
Yeah,
because you're climbing things, you're exploring things yourself. You're not part of a ride that's been designed for you.
Oh, you're making your own experience.
You're making your own experience. And actually, it's been shown that playing in nature definitely is good for kids, good for their mental health, but also it's been shown to generate friendships and social networks because they tend to explore in groups.
Yeah.
In that environment.
Well, I'm trying to think of our camping trips where we've got 20, 25 children. You're absolutely right. They get together, and in cross-gender groups as well, boys and girls mixing together. There's no sort of gender stereotypical behaviour going on.
Hierarchies tend to break down in that situation.
They do. And different ages getting on, and they become a sort of community, if you like, until they're hungry. And then they become a pain in the ass.
Right. Right. And there are fewer dangers like traffic in that sort of environment as well. So you feel freer to explore on their own.
Yeah. I made that joke about becoming a pain in the ass, but actually, do you know, they're not. They're not at all. They just come back in a band and say, when's supper? And sometimes you can say half an hour and they'll go, oh, okay, and then run off again. Wonderful times.
So I remember reading about a particular architectural practice in Japan where the architects, might as well give them a plug, it's Tezuka architects. Right. They design schools around trees, and they have the trees growing up through the classrooms, up through the roof of the thing, and then they have they encourage kids to play on these trees and climb up them, and they've got nets to stop them if they fall off. But there's a chance they can put their heads, or there is deliberately an element of risk built in, a bit of rough and tumble built in, that deliberately so, because they need a little bit of danger.
Did you climb trees when you were a youth, or were your limbs too?
Yeah,
feeble?
And I used to love forests, and I used to cycle through them and stuff. Yeah.
I used to climb so high in trees. It's incredible.
Me too.
Like 40, 50 feet up.
Yeah.
And the branches get pretty twiggy at that level.
Yeah.
But of course we would be light as anything. I remember looking down at the ground thinking, I think I'd probably definitely die. And of course I definitely would have died if I'd fallen off.
Yeah.
The risk's amazing.
Yeah.
But such fun though.
Yeah.
Being in a tree.
Both you and I were lucky enough to grow up in fairly rural environments where we had that access to all that.
Yeah,
I remember the farmer wasn't very happy, but there were loads of us used to play in this massive stack of hay bales.
Oh, playing in hay bales is the best, man.
Great fun.
Yeah.
And they'd create this chute that went down through the middle of it.
But you could create dens and little places and little romantic misunderstandings.
And I remember there was grain silo.
The farmer wasn't happy about that either.
No. And we jumped into a grain silo, for God's sake.
What?
Yeah.
Some people have to eat biscuits made out of that.
I know.
Dirty feet.
Yeah, we didn't care.
Yeah.
And I think adults are kids too, and I think we love to be playing out in nature, and there's some research projects going on showing that exercising in green spaces, or in what they call the blue spaces, so water
again,
has a much bigger stress busting effect than exercise alone.
Yeah.
And once again, there's a hierarchy. Exercising is good in itself, but then exercising in green spaces is better still.
Well, we used to exercise on Clapham Common, didn't we?
Yeah, you're getting added benefit of not just the sensory experience of nature, but then the exercise as well, a kind of synergistic effect. And then with the blue gym, I was thinking about how much I got out of surfing, even though I was an average at best surfer.
God, I'd love to see
how much fun I got out of that, and how addictive it was. I'd be out there for hours. And I looked at this. It was quite a heartwarming study, really. War veterans with PTSD, very difficult to treat. These guys were part of an initiative which paid for them to go out surfing. And
really?
There was a huge improvement in sort of their symptoms and their flashbacks, their anxiety, their nightmares and so on, which lasted way beyond the actual surfing session itself. But they go back every week.
Right.
And
really?
also, of course, they got a renewed sense of that camaraderie they'd had in the war. So the two things can combine.
That is nice.
Really help their PTSD.
And surfing, of course, you really are in nature because you're reliant on its...
You're interacting with it.
The waves.
For sure.
And you're right. Here is something there, right? I get what you're saying, you freaking hippie.
Yeah, man.
No, I'm joking.
Let's go to Burning Man. No, although actually, there's one thing that Ulrich is determined was that we're not so keen on featureless arid plains as landscapes.
No, well, they'd be threatening, wouldn't they? We have to live somewhere, right? We have to live in houses, and houses have to have strong walls and roofs and stuff. So we can't be within nature. And a lot of us live in cities because cities are great and cool to live in. So what do you do? Is this a pot plants? Are they the solution? Pot plants. Is that why people buy pot plants? Which are awful.
Pot plants, better than nothing.
Really?
Even having a picture of a green landscape on the wall has been shown to have an effect, yeah. Or videos of... There was one study where they compared feelings of creativity, inspiration, calmness, oneness with nature, and so on. They compared the actual immersive experience in a park to the experience of being at home watching a projected image of this scene. And it was almost as good
Bloody
in
hell.
terms of its effect on stress levels.
But a serious point, though. I mean, as we know, pot plants are awful and terrible dust collectors and just green, horrible messes. But what can you do in your home? Are you really pictures of nature?
Pictures and landscapes.
Try and break up the angles and the stark walls.
Paint a wall green.
Really?
Yeah, just the colour green has been shown to increase creativity in a lab-based test. Yeah, remarkably. Yeah, as opposed to any other colour on the spectrum.
Well, how do you test
or something
creativity?
achromatic. I think their task was how many applications you can put to a can of tomatoes or something like that.
Right. No, classic.
Was
Classic
the test.
mumbo jumbo.
But you weren't allowed to use a familiar use of it or anything like that. So, but they came up with more creative solutions if they'd first of all been exposed to the colour green. It's quite a stretch, but it's called the green effect. You can read about it. I was very sceptical, but there's something in it.
Well, your office is green. The walls of this office are green. The curtains are green, and you haven't
Kind of
said,
a blue green. Yeah.
You haven't said a single creative thing all day. But no, you've done very well. It's very nice. It's very nice. Yeah. So, Dr. Keedwell, psychiatrist, where does this fit in to your therapeutic parthenon? Would you ever? And this isn't trying to belittle it.
I would be quite realistic with people who live in big cities. If you can, try to choose a place with some sort of open space where you can grow plants and so on, or where you have at least a view out onto nature. If you can't do that, just factor into your weekly schedule going to the park, going to the local urban forest or whatever it is, and getting your dose of nature and doing some exercise in that environment as well.
Pot plant
will have a massive effect, much bigger effect than a pot plant. But have a pot plant. By all means, have a pot plant.
Spider plant, those horrible things.
A pet.
A pet? Yeah? Seriously?
Yeah. Even just goldfish.
Really? And my question really is, would you actually have that conversation with the patient as part of a treatment, potentially?
No, I must confess I probably wouldn't routinely, but I probably should.
Oh, well, think about it.
Yeah. Well, having said that, occupational therapists do get involved with trauma victims and get them gardening. That has a project in North London which does exactly that. It's a non-threatening kind of activity that people can do together.
Yeah, and it's well known to be awful,
and it's well known to be effective actually in reducing their levels of anxiety and enabling them to open up about their trauma.
Right. Good.
Gardening is very therapeutic. Everyone should get out and garden.
Well, I accept that it is creative, and growing things is like, oh wow, I grew something, and as in this digital world, which I love. Don't get me wrong. I with my boy, I developed a black and white film, for example.
Right. Something
that you've never needed to do, even since Boots processed your photos, and it was lovely just seeing something analog happen, even with chemicals, just in front of your face. From you're looking a bit confused.
Go a bit off point.
Well, no, the point was you were doing something with your hands.
I see.
Created something, and you were part of a process. That
Okay.
I don't know why I use photography, which is completely
which is unnatural and indoors. But yeah,
and not communing with nature.
And consider if you want to exercise, obviously you should be exercising 3 times a week to optimize your mood and so on, right?
Yeah.
But consider doing that outdoors rather than inside a gym. Do it in a natural environment, in a green environment.
Yeah. I like what you said.
Or if it's a summer, go and swim in a river or a lake, preferably one that's not polluted.
Right. Swimming in a polluted lake.
No, there was a study that showed that actually, if you live by the sea, once you've corrected for deprivation levels and age, your physical health is better. Nursing homes are built near the coast, which would skew your figures.
Oh, yeah. No, you've got to do that. Well, that's quite good. I don't think I've got anything else, really.
Shall we summarise?
Yes. I'll try, or do you want to try?
How confident do you feel about summarising?
Not very, other than to say, nice segue, that we should take into account the fact that we are part of what you called the biosphere, which is a known term, obviously, and therefore it's not surprising to find that we get comfort and a place of well-being from being placed in a natural environment. and that is not just necessarily with living things. It can be with non-living things as well, such as water fountains. I better put that in, or else you'll just leap on me. And that can be a very important part of our method of increasing our well-being. And I think that we should be aware that some of the conveniences of modern living, such as living in a city and living in a warm, well-insulated house, can sort of go against the fact that we need to be we are part of nature, and we need to almost refresh our batteries by being part of nature as much as we can.
Yeah.
And there seems to be some evidence to support the fact that it's a very important factor with our well-being,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, I think even if you're not lucky enough to have a ready access to nature where you live in a city, and you don't have a garden perhaps, or you don't have views of nature, then build into your routine visiting a park
Yes.
or a natural environment. And exercise in a natural environment is much more therapeutic in terms of stress busting and reducing anxiety levels and increasing creativity and clarity of thought than exercising in a gym.
Yeah, very good. And also, if you're exposed to a water feature, make sure it's not too massive.
Yeah, please engage with water, but don't just jump into the open sea.
Engage with water. That could have been the title of your book.
Well, it is. It's amazing how therapeutic water is. Even just a small amount of water.
I've spent many hours trying to get our fountain in our garden working, and when it does, it's much more complicated than you think getting it working, particularly when you're a bit.
I don't care.
Are you right? No. Goodbye.
Anyway, without sounding like massive hippies, go out and engage with nature, man.
Yeah.
And we would like to, I think, round off in the usual way, which is do visit ytlf.com. That's whytlf.com.
Email us hi@ytlf.com, and our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram handles are all YTLF. Tweet, email, interact on the Facebook forum, and we'd love to hear from you. And if you fancy a good read, it's Headspace, The Psychology of City Living by Dr. P. Keedwell, with loads of letters after his name. Yawn.
Please do go to wherever you get your podcasts and give us a nice rating. That would be much appreciated.
Yeah, man.
See you next time.
Take
Bye.
it easy.